Next part, we all together are going to be deploying Tuner. But I would actually like to do the first couple of steps first, then stop and sort of let you guys catch up, and then we'll sort of do it like leapfroggy style like that. So to start, I'd like you to close your computers and just watch as I do it. And then again, in like a couple minutes, y'all be able to like do it yourselves. So we do deploying to Heroku. Look at this guy. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clone down Tuner, and I'm just going to copy and paste these because I am lazy. Okay, I did miss one step in here. You'll need to cd into Tuner Rails users and then run this step. So I'm checking out this one branch called balls. Oh, well. I don't know why that didn't work the first time. Okay, cool. So now I've got it. So I'm checking out that one branch, and then that's sort of where we left off on Thursday. And I'm just going to make a copy of that branch called deploying simply because I don't want to write 5 added associations all the time. And the branch name, like what you actually call the branch name isn't important, but we are going to be referencing the branch name in a little bit. So what I just did is I cloned it down, I checked out to where we ended on Thursday, and then I basically just renamed the branch. Did you have a question?
Just that your command line, when you type at the very bottom, it cuts it off on the screen, and I was wondering if you could.
Man, this is one of those. Okay. Oh, Joe showed me the trick for making this not do that a while ago. Let me see if I can get it to work real quick. Oh, wait, is it? We should be good now. All right, installing the Heroku tool belt. I already did that. Cool, so now I am all ready to go. I'm inside my Tuner Rails users repo in the deploying branch that I just created. And so now I am going to type Heroku create. Actually, I'm going to do 2 different things. First, I'm just going to do Heroku create. And when I do this, it is going to give me a really weird named app. In this case, Stormy Headland 33003. So if you don't give Heroku a name for your app, it's going to make one up for you. And they're always this sort of weird, like, haiku, sort of granola-y kinds of things over here. So, all right, I look at that and I'm like, well, I don't actually want that. So instead, I'm going to create a different one. And incidentally, all this does is it just sort of like reserves a space on Heroku's servers for me. I haven't actually pushed anything up yet. I haven't pushed any code anywhere. It's just sort of reserving a URL for me. But I don't want my app to be called Stormy Headland. I want it to be called Tuner. So instead, I'm going to do Heroku create again, and this time I'm going to call it Robin Tuner Rails. It actually doesn't create any files. What it does do is it adds a new it adds a new remote repo into my GitHub repo. So usually the only remote we have is origin. Sometimes you also have your fork. Now we're adding another one for Heroku. So you can see that this Robin Tuner Rails didn't actually work. I still have Stormy Headland in here. I'll get rid of that. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to delete all of my Heroku apps. One thing about Heroku is that you are going to end up with a lot of Heroku apps, and they only let you have 5 without having to pay for it. So there are going to be many times when you want to delete it. The instructions for doing this command that I'm typing right now, is in sort of a cheat sheet at the end of the lesson plan. I've just done it a bunch, so I happen to know it. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to do Heroku create, and I'm going to call it Robin Tuner Rails. All right, and there we go. So if you try to do an app with an underscore in the name, it's going to throw this error at you. Name must start with a letter and can only contain lowercase letters, numbers, and dashes. which I think is pretty self-explanatory. So you can't have underscores in the name of your app on Heroku. You can use dashes, but you can't use underscores. All right, so again, I haven't actually deployed anything yet. That's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to do git push Heroku, and then the name of the branch on my computer, :master. So if I wasn't in a branch called deploying, if I was in a branch called Wombat, I would do git push Heroku Wombat : master. It's just whatever branch you're in right now. Right now I'm in a branch called deploying, so I'm doing deploying : master. This is saying I want to take this branch called deploying and I want to push it to a branch called master on Heroku. So now I'm starting to deploy, and now we're going to wait for a little bit while it does a whole bunch of stuff. Let me expand this. So you can see now that it's starting to install some gems. It's pushed up all of my code to Heroku, and now Heroku is automatically doing bundle install. And it's installing all of these different gems. It's going to install everything for my app. So wait a minute while it's doing this. Myra?
Two questions. So when you push the deployment to the master, right, is it merging those deployment changes to the master one?
It's not. It doesn't affect any of the code on my computer. So doing this stuff on Heroku never affects the code on your computer. And it never affects the code on GitHub. All it's saying is, over on Heroku, I want to create a new branch called master, and I want to push my deploying things to that. It doesn't affect my own master branch on my computer, just on Heroku. What was your other question?
That.
This. It didn't work.
Yeah, I got like errors like push. So
Cool. So we'll get into that. Adrian, did you have another question?
Is now the right time to ask if you are working in a feature branch on your computer? Should you deploy your master branch, or should you just go ahead and deploy your feature branch and
I would say,
separately?
so if you have a feature branch, then you probably want to merge it into master before you deploy it. So in that case, you would go like check out master, git merge your feature branch, and then git push Heroku master. But it really depends. Maybe you want to push your feature branch. I don't know. Sort of up to you. All right. So did this work? How do you know? Yeah, it says push rejected. So if you get this, it says rejected twice, failed twice. So yeah, I have a pretty good idea that this did not work. So why didn't it work? That is because, let's see, if I go up here, so this is where I mentioned that having bad CSS can break your app. Notice how here it says invalid CSS after something, something, something. So I'm going to fix that now. Let me open up a new tab. Oh, no, I'll just use this tab. And I have no idea what this error is, but it does tell me something about line 55. So I'm going to look at line 55 of my CSS and see what's there. So here is my code. Let me pull this up a little bit. Style sheets, application.css, and let's look at line 55. All right, so Adam's already giving me a hint here that something is rotten in the state of Denmark. I have font inherit in a different font from everything else. It's not bolded. That's because font inherit is invalid CSS. There's no CSS property called font inherit. The reason this failed is because whenever you try to push to production, what Rails does is it takes all of your different CSS files and it minifies them or uglifies them. So if you have multiple CSS files, it's going to condense them into one. That's nice because people looking at your app only need to load one CSS file. And by uglifying them, remember that means it like strips out all of the spaces and scrunches it down as much as it can. It saves memory. But it can only do that if your CSS is actually valid. And my CSS is not right now, so I need to fix it. So that's the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this. All right, so that's step one. There's another step, which is adding this gem called Rails 12 factor. So this is kind of a weird thing. All you really need to do is just put this line somewhere in your code. So I just copied and pasted that line and put it in here. This group production is saying use this gem only in production. As for what it actually does, that's a good question. This 12-factor gem, it does a lot of stuff with serving assets. So assets are anything in this assets folder, meaning your images, JavaScripts, CSS, whatever. You pretty much always want to have this gem in your app when you're deploying to Heroku. And in fact, it's so important that this gem is actually in Heroku's documentation. It used to be something that was like bundled in with Rails right out of the box. It's not anymore, so you need to put this gem in there. So I'm doing two things. I'm fixing that CSS error, and I'm putting in this 12-factor thing. So it's going to do some stuff with making it better able to serve up CSS. It's also going to do some stuff with my server logs. If you want to learn more about it, then there's some information at the end of the lesson plan. But for right now, just sort of take it as a given that you want this gem in here when you push to production. So that's it. I did just add a gem. So anytime I add a gem, what should I do? What command should I run? Bundle install. So I'm going to do that. All right.
So you didn't have to run the bundle install without production one. You can get bundle install.
So I'm just running it on my own computer, and then when I push up to production, every time you push up to production, Heroku is going to run bundle install itself. So I'm going to do it locally so I have that gem, and then Heroku is going to do it automatically so they have that gem. Ryan?
The Factor 12 gem, is that something that you're going to see on all production environments, or is it specifically for Heroku?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure, actually. I think it may just be a Heroku thing. And that's largely because Heroku takes care of a lot of stuff automatically for you. Like, it takes care of a lot of stuff. And this 12-factor thing sort of greases the wheels on that. If you're doing more of like a hand-rolled approach, then you may not need it. But because Heroku is doing so many things out of the box, it needs this to sort of grease the wheels. Casey?
I was actually going to comment on what you said. Like, I was reading the documentation, it says Heroku specific.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's actually doing, running two other gems just on that one line.
Cool.
Automatically.
Okay, thank you. I didn't know that. So I've made two changes. I changed my gem file, I changed my CSS file, then I ran bundle install. So now I'm just going to commit, added 12-factor and fixed CSS. And I'm going to push back up to Heroku. So that's going to be git push Heroku, the name of my branch, master. And let's see what happens this time. All right, so it's going to go through this whole bundle install thing again. It should go a little bit faster this time since it's already done it once. While we're waiting on this, questions about this stuff?
A lot of things under the hood.
Oh, there's lots of things under the hood. Yeah.
So if you were deploying to Heroku from your master branch, would it just be git push Heroku master?
Yeah. So if you're just deploying from your master branch, then it's git push Heroku master. You could do git push Heroku master : master. It's the exact same thing. Right?
Does the uglification of your CSS, can that cause problems? Like, I could see having like a class with the exact same name in two files that do two different things.
Mm-hmm.
That take care of that, or?
It can cause some problems, which is another reason why you want to deploy early. Usually it doesn't, and there's some things you can do to sort of control for that. But I would say as a rule in CSS, you don't want to have two classes with the same name anyway. And so if your CSS is proper, then you shouldn't need to worry about it. But yeah, it can cause problems sometimes by like putting things out of order. Usually it doesn't, but sometimes it can.
Stick to best practices and we'll be all right.
Yep. All right, so I see a couple of warnings, but those are not errors. So, and I see this verifying deploy done thing, so it looks like it worked pretty well. Cool. So now I should be able to just go to this link and check out my app. So I'm going to do that. Ah, man, that's a bummer. Or sorry, but something went wrong. So Heroku does not do two things for you. It does not migrate your database, and it does not seed your database. It creates your database, but it doesn't migrate or seed it. We need to do that manually. So in order to do that, I'm going to run Heroku run, and then the usual command, rake db migrate. You can put pretty much anything you want after Heroku run, and it'll work just fine. So for instance, if I do Heroku run, let's see if this works, ls. There we go. So now it's showing me all of the files that are on my Heroku server. You can put anything you want after Heroku run, and it's just going to run that command on the Heroku server. So in this case, I'm going to do Heroku run rake db migrate. All right, that looks promising. And so now if I look at this, there we go. There's Tuner. Doesn't have any data in it yet, so I'm going to do the exact same thing for seeding. Heroku run rake db seed.
Are you able to take all that in the same line?
Sorry?
Are you able to take all that in the same line? So make two different.
Yeah, you probably could, but I like doing it in separate lines. All right, let me refresh again, and there we go. Cool. So I'm going to try signing up. Bob Dole. Okay, I'll give yeah, he has a new song called Bob's Bolero. All right, there we go. Looks pretty good. And if I look at my profile, I can see that I have created Bob's Bolero. I'm deployed. Bada boom. And that's pretty much it, I think. Are there any like gotchas I forgot after this? Oh yeah, just the last thing. So if you want to be able to see your server logs, like if you have something that you're putting out or whatever, the way you do on your own computer, in order to do that, you're going to do Heroku logs. There are a couple different options here. If you do just Heroku logs, it just shows you the most recent ones. If you do Heroku logs -n 2000, it shows you the 2000 most recent ones. I like Heroku logs -t. And this just stays open. So if I refresh this page, I can see it updating automatically. So if you're bored and you have a deployed app, you can just leave this open and then you can see this update as people use your app, which is kind of cool. Obviously, I can't do anything in this page, so if I want to issue commands, then I'm going to need to open up a new tab and do stuff in there. But other than that, this guy just sort of does its thing.
Can you open up your own console from Heroku?
Yes. Yeah. Great question. You can. So how would I do that, do you think?
Heroku Rails C.
What?
Heroku Run Rails C.
There we go. Yep. And so let's see. Artist.all. There we go. And actually, you don't even need to copy and paste the URL. Heroku has this little shortcut built in. If you do Heroku open, then it opens the page for you automatically in your browser. So you don't need to copy and paste the URL if you don't want to. So that is deployment. All right, so questions about that process before I ask you guys to go through it. Andrew, I saw your hand first.
Oh, just quickly, you said you got some warnings, but you said not to worry about it. Are there any warnings that we do need to, it just shouldn't?
Yeah, nah. If you get an error, then you need to worry about it. But warnings.
So it's kind of like with Validator, it's like errors more take precedence over warnings.
Yeah.
Functionality.
Yeah, I mean, warnings won't break your app. An error probably will break your app. So warning, like I think in this case, I don't remember what it is. I think it's like I didn't specify what version of Ruby I want to use, so it throws a warning about that. I don't really care. If this was like a real app, then I might worry about that, but for this one, I don't really care too much. Alexa?
Yes, when you are naming the app, should it be the same name as your file?
Doesn't matter. You can call it whatever you want. And if you don't call it anything, then it'll give you, like flagrant sunrise something or whatever. All right?
I noticed when you do like a rate create and big change, it did locally to your server. Is there a way, like in the future, where like people can stop that? Because you can make local changes to a whole server. Wouldn't that be a problem in the future?
I'm not sure what you mean.
So it's like, because you have like anything like, so people working on a project, right?
Mhm.
But if they get to make local changes and change the whole server,
Well, if I make local changes, it's not going to change anything on Heroku. Anything I do on my computer doesn't automatically go up to Heroku. And similarly, anything that happens on Heroku doesn't automatically go into my computer. They're really two completely different computers. Other questions? All right, cool. Last thing I want to mention is that, so let's see. If you want to, actually no, I'll talk about that later. Okay, so for now, go ahead and just start going through these steps. The last thing I want to remind you is make sure you CD into the Tuner Rails users folder before you do this git checkout, because otherwise it's not going to work. I'll actually fix that right now.
So you want us to do it with tuners, not with ours?
I would rather you start off with Tuner for now, just so you get familiarity with the process. Then later on, after you've done Tuner, then go ahead and take a stab at it with your own app. CD Tuner Rails users.